Mold Tool is the official sponsor of the Grease and Glamour podcast. Established in 1853, Mold Tool has grown to become a recognized leader in lubricant technology. Racing teams around the world have trusted Mold Tool to deliver the endurance and performance needed to compete at the highest level. Even if you're not racing on the track, Mold Tool's full range of synthetic lubricants will protect your engine against wear and tear of your daily commute. Stop by Universal Imports to purchase Mold Tool's line of products today.
We are back for another episode of the Grease and Glamour podcast, and I'm going to bring this Grease and Glamour music down, and I'm actually going to replace it, because this is something I've always wanted to do, and now I get a chance to do it, and I'll have a reason behind it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is 3 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon here in Rochester, New York. The weather is chilly, but it is oh so warm in here. And we are listening to the great sounds of Jeff Tyzik, Stride with Ease, a 1980 jazz classic. And today we have with us in studio Grammy Award winner Jeff Tyzik, and he told me not to tell him what I was going to do, so a surprise. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. Man, you know, the last time I listened to that, I have to say it was probably 35 years ago.
Oh, I was listening to a bunch of your music over the last couple weeks, and I love this song. That's
actually my very first album I recorded here.
Really?
Yeah.
Right here in Rochester.
Yeah.
Wow.
PCI recording, not around anymore, but it's a long time ago.
Remember PCI.
1979, I think, is when I actually did the first recording of this, and later Capitol Records took it. It came back out in 80.
Did PCI also do video too? Because I think we did it. We shot a commercial there. My father shot a commercial.
They started off just as a recording studio, and then they became kind of a sound stage and on a kind of a small scale. But yeah, they were doing a lot of commercials there. Yeah.
Oh, they were like off of East Avenue or something.
Well, at first they were Atlantic Avenue.
Okay. So, see.
Oh, what a surprise.
I am so excited for this podcast because Jeff Tyzik is, I could say he's a friend, but actually I can say he's like a cousin.
I think we've gone to brother now.
Oh, brother. Okay. All right. Well,
upgraded.
Well, yeah. We have to, I want Jeff to tell that story because if he remembers it, how the cousin brother thing came about.
Well, the cousin thing came about when I was here with my wife, Jill. And we bought an A4, and, we picked it out, and you got it all ready. And she came in to get it, and you had a bouquet of flowers on the windshield outside with a little note that said, "From Cousin Mark."
Well, the Cousin Mark thing is I've used, I am to many people Cousin Mark, Uncle Mark, Brother Mark, because when a lot of our customers, when their kids would go to college and they take their cars, I would tell them, listen, if you have to go somewhere for repairs in one of these cities that you're not familiar with, tell them that you have an uncle that owns a car shop, so that way they won't, they'll think twice before they try to sell you something that you don't need or something like that. So, I used to get some phone calls going, yeah, are you Uncle Mark?
Well, you became Brother Mark.
Then I graduated to Brother Mark. That's awesome.
You saved the day. This is unbelievable. I was in New York, actually, with my daughter Jamie, and Jill was in town, but Jamie and I were having a big meeting about a music project we were doing, and I had a BMW at the time, an X3.
Yep, X3, yep.
And so we were leaving New York at the end of the day, and we were driving up to Westchester where Jamie lives, and I was on the Major Deegan Expressway, and all of a sudden...
Like rush hour.
And it was about 4:45, actually it was about 4:30, and I'm stepping on the gas, and all of a sudden nothing's happening. And my daughter says, Dad, you better get off this thing. And all of a sudden the car started working. I said, well, I don't even know where we are. We're somewhere in the Bronx. I mean, let's keep going. And then all of a sudden There's nothing happening.
Oh.
And I see this little triangle on the side where there's an up ramp, and then you're on the expressway with the 4 lanes wide. So I said, well, let me just nurse it over under the triangle. And then that's the end of that. And all these lights came on, and I'm like, oh man, what is happening? So I said, look, Jill's like, well, we got to look in the manual. I said, forget that. So I called Universal.
Called brother Mark.
Well, I think I got Mike first. And Mike was like, oh yeah, that means, I think it's the water pump, or there was something that he thought it was. And I said, man, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm sitting here in the middle of nowhere. I mean, nowhere in the sense that I'm in the middle of 9 million people in cars.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So it was just before rush hour, and I got out of the car and I walked Jill and Jamie down. There was nobody coming up the up ramp, and I got them down on the street level. I said, look, take an Uber and go to Westchester. I'm going to figure this out. So then you called me and said, look, get a tow, and I want you to tow it to this dealer in New Jersey that I work with. Well, what I didn't realize is when you get a tow, first of all, like, you're not calling AAA.
Yeah.
In New York.
It's not Rochester.
Well, in New York, if it's an expressway, you're calling the police. They have one designated tow firm that's going to tow you.
Yep.
And you said, okay, get the tow and ask the guy to take you, to Paramus, even if you have to pay him a little extra, whatever the story is. And you said, I have a Gunter, your dad, told you, we want to buy this Q5 anyway. Buy the car and let Tyzik drive it back to Rochester.
Right.
So the guy comes with, I'm sitting there 45 minutes. Now, like, it is jammed. Nobody's showing up. So I see way in the distance these police lights on,
Mm-hmm.
And finally a police car comes up next to me and said, are you the guy that called in? I said, yeah, 45 minutes ago. He goes, oh, we just wanted to make sure you were really here before we sent the tow truck.
Oh, boy.
Oh, jeez.
So now another 40 minutes, big truck comes. Guy hooks my car up. And I said, can you take me to Paramus? He goes, no way. He says, I'm only allowed to take you 3/4 of a mile off the expressway.
Oh, my God.
So he drops me at some like gas station that is just, it's a convenience store with gas tanks, and I'm sitting there. Now I call AAA.
Right.
So it's another hour and a half. So finally the guy comes. He said, well, it turned out that the dealer you were sending me to has 2 locations. There's
They have Upper Saddle River and Paramus. Yeah.
Well, what they have is, in this particular area, they've got the showroom.
They have 2. Yep, that's right.
And then they have the repair place.
Yes.
So I had to pick up the car. I had to drop the car at the repair place and then pick up the car at the showroom. So it was 2 different locations, which is fine, So finally, I finally got the car, and, so now it's 11 o'clock at night. And so I drove it to Westchester. We used it for the weekend. And on the way home to Rochester, I was in the car with Jill. We're driving back. And I said, it's a pretty cool car. I said, why don't we just buy this one? So you saved the day. I don't know who would ever do anything like that.
Well,
By the way, on a weekend.
Yeah, well, first of all, I appreciate that. And it's kind of just ingrained into me that whenever a challenge comes up like that, I look at it as, here's my opportunity to shine, or to try and help somebody out or help the situation. Because one of the things I will tell people out there is that having really good doing business the proper way with people pays off. And this dealer that I was dealing with, this guy, I've been buying cars for him for years, but he's just a sales manager there. He's not the owner of the dealership. He doesn't really have the authority to make big decisions like, hey, I'm going to buy this car. Take my word for it. I'll send you a check. And we're not, there's also the way you do business in Rochester, which that might sound a little more reasonable. And then there's the way you do business in New Jersey, which may not be quite as, not everybody's as trusting. But, I called him up. I said, and of course, I have got a name drop a little bit. I'm like, this is Jeff Tyzik. He's a Grammy Award winner. Come on, we got to take care of him. I said, you've got this Q5 there. We want to buy it. We're going to send a check down. Just trust us. Trust me, I'm a car salesman. That's always my famous line. And he put the keys, I think, in the tailpipe.
Well, that's what I got to tell you. That blew my mind because I said to you, I'm on the phone with you, Mark. It's going to be after business hours. How am I going to? They're going to leave it with a place where there's an awning, and the keys will be in the tailpipe
in Paramus, New Jersey.
Yeah, and I'm thinking that I'm going to be there, but that car's not going to be sitting there. But there were the keys in the tailpipe,
and they even allowed us to use one of their dealer plates, and they did the whole thing for us. So, kudos to Jack Daniels Audi for helping us out there. But so then Jeff, took the car and came back, and I'd be lying if it wasn't in the back of my head that might be a car that Jeff will be interested in buying when he gets.
Even so, who. I've been doing business, I think, with you for 20, 25 years at least. But who would do that? That was amazing what you did, and I really appreciate it. And so you went from cousin to brother overnight. All right,
I like it. That's awesome. I can't go much further than brother, so I think.
Let's see. No, I don't think so.
So, anyway, Jeff agreed to come in and talk to us on the podcast, and I think it's awesome because even though it's our podcast is loosely based on car stuff, today we're going to kind of veer off a little bit, talk about my other passion, which is music. And a lot of people really don't know your history. They know that you, and by the way, I need to tell people this. Jeff is such a humble guy and such a just awesome guy that he always says, I talked to him about his career and his success, but he always kind of seems to downplay it when you talk to him. But every time he walks out of here, there's a customer going, "Is that Jeff Tyzik?" And I say, "Yep, that's Jeff Tyzik." But Jeff, reading your bio and thinking about, I love those sort of stories. How you, and maybe you can touch on it, but I'll just set it up. Early age, you see a parade.
Yeah.
You get into playing the trumpet.
Yeah. And
you fast forward a little while, then you're at Eastman. You meet Chuck Mangione. Mm-hmm. You do some stuff with Chuck. More time goes on, and now you're a Grammy Award winner who has produced and worked with the likes of Doc Severinsen, and I think you still talk to Doc.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's 93 now.
Yeah, maybe you can...
Actually, my daughter's his manager.
Oh, really?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Is he still... Well, he's still doing gigs, right?
He was... Last April, he was here. Wonderful young guy, Carl Stabnow, who years ago was a student... high school performer who got a chance to play with the RPO on a series I was doing, who now works with Mark Iacona at the International Jazz Festival. He's a wonderful young musician, but also a promoter. So he promoted a concert with a big band he put together with Doc Severinsen last April. So Doc was here. Yeah.
And for those of you who don't know who Doc Severinsen is, he kind of became popular, I guess, amongst just, people that don't follow big band or music, and a little show called The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson.
Right.
So
for 25 years.
Right. So he was the music director, I guess, if you will, of that and conductor of the Tonight Show band. Right. So maybe you can walk us through that beginning, in Hyde Park when you see the bugle.
Yeah.
The buglers or the trumpeters, and then how you get to where you are now.
Well, I saw a drum and bugle corps down the street, and my birthday was coming up, and, I loved the sound of it. And my mom said, "Well, what do you want for your birthday?" I said, "I want a bugle, because they were real bugles they played. They weren't trumpets, they were bugles."
Okay.
And so my birthday came, and there was a little case. I opened it up, and there was this thing. It looked like a bugle, but it had these buttons on it, and I started crying. It was like, that's not a bugle. It was a cornet, But I started taking private lessons right away, kind of when I was in third grade, which is pretty young. So I was way ahead of everybody else, and so I ended up being the best player in the band. But I learned something in sixth grade. I learned three things about music that were very important. First thing I learned was I played a solo with the band in the final concert of the year, and it was called Johnny Learns to Play. And it was this little, kind of novelty piece where you purposely sound bad in the beginning. And then at the end, you play this stuff and, you sound really good. So at the end of that piece, people applauded. I mean, it was crazy. And the thought that I had was, it wasn't like, oh, I'm so great. It was like, wow, this makes people happy.
Yeah.
So that was one thing I learned. Second thing I learned was through music, you can meet some interesting people. So that same year, we had an elementary school marching band, which is kind of, usually you don't get that till high school, but our teacher had gone to Michigan State and she was a crazy, marching band person. So anyway, we were going to march in the Memorial Day parade. And the night before she called me. I lived in Hyde Park, New York, which is 75 miles north of New York City.
Poughkeepsie area.
Yeah, around Poughkeepsie. And she called me and said, at the Roosevelt Mansion tomorrow, there's a service at the graveside, and they want a young trumpet player to play taps at the end of the service. Would you be willing to do it? I said, oh, yes, Miss Holloway, I'll be happy to do it. So the next morning, I'm outside in my case, and these American Legion guys pick me up and drive me over. So I walk back to the gravesite. And there are 4 guys standing there in military uniforms with, a chest full of medals. There's an honor guard, Eleanor Roosevelt, and her son John, and me.
Wow.
So that was pretty amazing experience.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so I realized, okay, you can meet some really interesting people in music. And I've gone on, I've met many great artists that I've worked with, and also, President Ford, and, I've gotten to meet some pretty interesting people. So, and then the third thing I learned was, all during high school, I worked at a car wash for $1.05 an hour, either wiping the cars down, and then when I got a license, I could actually drive them out, and do the windows and stuff. I got $1.05 an hour.
Nice.
So I had a little band. My brother played drums. I played trumpet, and this guy played a thing called Chordavox.
Okay.
Which it looks like an accordion, but it was a Hammond B3 in the box, basically.
Yeah.
So we just we got together and played tunes. And then one day he said, you know what? 2 weeks from now, what are you guys doing on Friday night? I said, nothing. I think I was about 14. He said, well, I got us a job in a bar.
Oh.
We're going to play 2 hours. We're going to make $15 each and get pizza and something to drink. And I thought, wow, maybe you can make money at music. So that was all within that short time period. But I really loved music. I was able to express myself and my emotions, and it was just kind of a thrilling thing for me, because it's all about self-worth. If you apply yourself, you get better, and there's a sense of importance about that you can control your own destiny. If you put yourself really into something, it's going to reward you in many ways, which is why I think music is such a great thing for anybody, but especially for young kids.
Right.
So, basically I just kind of kept getting better, had great experiences. And I said to my band director, well, I want to go into music. And he said, okay, well, you should go to Fredonia and become a band director. But I had a friend of mine who was a few years older than me, who had gone to a place called the Eastman School of Music. I'd never heard of it. I didn't know anything about it. And he kept writing me letters saying, you should come here. It's a great school. And we have, this guy, Chuck Mangione, who's teaching jazz.
Now, was Eastman a big school, you just weren't aware of it, or were they not really a well-known music school at that time?
No, it was one of the major conservatories of the world.
Okay.
But it was just out of my scope.
Out of your scope,
and my band director had gone to Fredonia, and it was a whole other thing. I had no idea what Eastman even was.
Yep.
So my friend said, well, you need to come up here and audition, and this is where you should come. Plus, back then, Fredonia State School for the whole year, and this is in '69, was $750.
Oh my goodness!
But
you also only made $1.05 at the car wash.
Right. but the Eastman School of Music was $2,600.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so it was more than 4 times.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
So I got on it. I sent a letter in, and I got like a time to come up here, and it was April. And in Poughkeepsie, where the train is, it's 60 degrees. I'm like, oh, okay. So I had some little coat on, my case and a little bag with some clothes. I was going to be here for a couple of days. I got off the train at the train station in Rochester. It was a blizzard.
Oh, jeez.
And I'm walking through this blizzard to the school.
What a difference 200 miles makes,
my
huh?
God.
Exactly.
And this guy, Chris Vidal, he just passed recently. He was one of my best friends in the world. Amazing person. As a matter of fact, most of what I'm doing today, I wouldn't have done without him taking an interest in me as a high school kid. He was kind of like an older brother. But anyway, he gave me a tour of the Eastman School for 2 hours, and it literally started in the boiler room.
Oh,
Wow.
And then we ended up 2 hours later standing on the Eastman Theater stage, which I stand on
all
regularly.
the time. Yeah.
And I walked in that building, and just something spoke to me and said, "This is where you belong." And that's how I ended up coming here. It's crazy, crazy
Incredible.
quirk of fate.
All right. Well, we're going to keep talking about this stuff, but we're going to take a little bit of a break. We're going to pay some bills with some ads, and then we're going to come back and find out a little bit more about Jeff's career and where we are here today. Because what a lot of people don't realize also is that Jeff is not just the principal pops conductor here in Rochester. He's also Dallas, Detroit,
Right.
Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
What am I missing? Florida?
Florida Orchestra.
Yeah, I've got a Florida story because I got to see
I wanna
got
hear
to see
that.
Jeff down in
Okay.
Florida. So we'll be back just in a minute, and we'll keep talking.
Car repairs can get expensive. That's why Universal Imports has got you covered with their exclusive Car Care Club. For an annual investment of just $49, you can save hundreds with a free New York State inspection, $10 off oil changes, 10% off labor, $50 off alignments, and so much more. Visit universalimports.com or visit 834 Linden Avenue, right off 441.
Let my family take care of your family's automobiles. Visit universalimports.com to join our Car Care Club today.
Mold is the official sponsor of the Grease and Glamour podcast. Established in 1853, Mold has grown to become a recognized leader in lubricant technology. Racing teams around the world have trusted Mold to deliver the endurance and performance needed to compete at the highest level. Even if you're not racing on the track, Mold full range of synthetic lubricants will protect your engine against wear and tear of your daily commute. Stop by Universal Imports to purchase Mold line of products today.
We're coming back now. This is another one of Jeff's classics. It's called Smile.
I like it. It does make me smile.
It does. Honestly, I could picture this being like the soundtrack to my life. Just happy when everything's going good. It's not always
this
like
in a while either.
Oh, it's great. It's you on trumpet, right?
Right. Yeah, and I think that might be actually my friend Chris Vidal on saxophone.
And you did all the arrangements of the music as well at that time?
I had a band. We kind of all worked together in the studio. I mean, we came in with written out music, and then we kind of, you make it happen in the studio. So I had wonderful guys, Bob Stein, who worked with comedian Robert Klein for years. He went to U of R. He
Love
played
Robert
in the U of R
Klein.
Jazz Ensemble when I was the student director of it. He became a fan. And bass player Mike Boone, who went to Eastman. And then Mark Minetta, great guitar player from Rochester, who he passed away a number of years ago, but I played with him for years.
So, it's interesting when you talk to different musicians and how they've written their music, how their works come out. Obviously, they collaborate with other artists. And I would be remiss if I didn't at least make a nod in my next podcast about the passing of Neil Peart from Rush, because he was a huge influence on me. That band was a huge influence on me growing up. One of the reasons why I love rock and roll was Rush. I mean, what a great band. But what was very interesting about Rush was Neil Peart, even though he wasn't the original drummer of Rush, but he came early on and was the big part of their success, he would write the lyrics to most of their songs. Then Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson would go off and write music and use the lyrics and the poems that Neil would give them and kind of use that as the inspiration for the music. Then they'd send the music back to Neil. Neil would orchestrate the drums parts to it. Right. And that's how they'd piece it all together. So often they wrote these songs, they weren't even together. They just kind of bounced this stuff between each other, came up with ideas, and then went in together and sort of crafted it. And
well, that's that studio experience, which I did for many, many years. But now it's an interesting experience in a different way, because you stand on a podium with 75 musicians, and even if the music's all written out, you're all making it happen.
Right.
When you conduct an orchestra.
This is one of the things that, I understand the purpose of a conductor, and it's always so amazing to me how intently the musicians are watching you for their cue. I mean, they have the music in front of them, so they know what they have to play, but it's a matter of the actual, like, when this punches, when this is supposed to, there's different words for it, I'm sure, but when the
music
build comes up, when the fade, there are these moments when they really need you. There are the moments where they need you, but there's also a moment where they're all communicating with each other, and you're part of it. But one of the best things to do is not to try to always control that, but to sort of invite that inspiration from the musicians. It's a tricky position to be in. How do you, I've seen you when you've come in you've come in to get something done on your car, and you're in the waiting room and you're working on stuff on your computer and you've got your headphones on. And I always wonder when I listen to any orchestrated music, when there's an orchestra playing it, when you take a composer and they sit down at the piano or whatever instrument they start building the song off of, and then where do you go, all right, this is going to be the cello part, and I want these strings here, and I want these wind instruments here, and that is amazing to me. How do you build that?
Well, from all of your training years of learning your own instrument and then playing in ensembles and hearing, what the flutes sound like, the clarinets, the violas, the cellos, different percussion instruments, brass, and you sort of develop over time what these sounds are that work well together. And then as a composer, or in my case, composer, orchestrator, or arranger, depending on which hat I'm wearing on what day, as I start to work on a piece, I'll hear that sound in my head. This should be this instrument.
But like, let's say there's a horn section piece, but not every player is going to be playing the same notes even.
Right.
And that's where it gets crazy, because I know playing guitar, and I'm an amateur guitar player, but when I'll record stuff at home and I'll try to find harmony notes to go with things to kind of come up with some cool sounds. It's tricky. You really have to know music theory, or is it, I don't know, is it music theory, or is it?
Part of it is intellect,
yeah,
which is understanding chord structures and theory, but part of it's inspiration. Just what do you feel?
Yeah.
And the way I think of it is, if you take like a big painting that has beautiful colors on it, well, I think of sounds of an instrument as a color.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a musical color.
Right.
And it's an aural, AURAL color.
Yeah.
And I'm making a picture, I'm painting a picture with sound.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I think of it. So, and let's take the instrument that you play. Just take a guitar, for instance. Well, there's no such thing as a guitar.
Yeah.
There's 12 string, there's classical, there's nylon strings,
right.
There's steel strings, there's electric with distortion, without distortion. Yep. I mean, every one of those is a color. So you're not going to take some ballad and then crank your amp and get distortion coming out.
Crank it to 11, baby.
You're going to pick the right sound for the right piece.
Yep.
Which is the same thing I do, except I've got like everything from a piccolo to a tuba to deal with. And sometimes I am marrying a rock band with an orchestra.
Yes.
I mean, there are all these possibilities. So they're all what I call musical colors. And how do you make that tapestry work together? It's something you learn.
How long does it take you to write a piece or compose a piece?
Sometimes I can think about something for months. Mm-hmm. and I know I want to do it. I'm just not moved. I can't figure out. I might be static for a long time, and then write an entire piece in 3 days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So and sometimes I'll work on something for a long time. I wrote recently, a few years ago, a jazz violin concerto, which is kind of a little different for an orchestra to play a jazz violin. But we premiered it here with Juliana Theda.
I saw your interview. You had a little interview with her. It was on the RPO YouTube channel or on their website. Yep.
So I spent probably 4 or 5 months writing that piece. I mean, I didn't do it every day, but it took a while for it to gel, and then I would do it. Mm-hmm. I wrote. I'm creating a lot of pops concerts for orchestra now. Really kind of interesting ones. One of them is the Beatles Revolution concert, and it's 28 different Beatles songs with visuals. I think we're gonna do it in Rochester next season, but I ended up doing 28 or 26 Beatles songs, and I tried to keep them as authentic as possible, but also to make them a little bit symphonic without really ruining the original intent of the music. Yeah. And that probably took about 2 months to do those arrangements, which is kind of pretty quick for that much material.
Yeah.
And then I ended up doing a Motown show, same concept, using an instrumentation that fits Motown instead of a full symphony. I mean, I'm sorry, but there weren't bassoons in the Motown music. So I have a trumpets, trombones, saxophones, French horns, percussion, and strings, and then a cool rhythm section. So it's a little more of what I call a symphonic rock orchestra.
Okay.
And so typically those kinds of projects take me a couple months to create a whole concert. But sometimes if I'm working on an original piece, I might be thinking about it for 5 months before I put a note down. And sometimes it might just be a struggle. And I might try to write something every day for a month and a half and nothing comes out that I like, and I just tear it up and forget about it and move on. So it's never the same.
One of the things that you hear people talk about when they talk about Jeff Tyzik and his work is that even though, I mean, Pops has been around since like the 20s or something, right? Pops orchestrated music. I think the Boston Pops made it a pretty
late 20s, really early 30s,
popular. Yeah. But Rochester, I think that the people that can appreciate it, they realize it, but a lot of people may not. That we have a conductor here that is really an innovator. So this is why you are in all these other orchestras, because you are this dynamic presence for Pop's music. So it's not really Pop's as usual with Jeff Tyzik, I don't think.
Well, the reason for that is that I think music should have integrity. So, in the classical world, you put a Beethoven symphony on the music stand, there's integrity. We know it's been around for hundreds of years, and there's a history behind it. But as Duke Ellington said, there are only two kinds of music in the world, good and bad. And within the popular music format, there is a lot of fantastic music. I have a show called Women Rock. Mm-hmm. And it's got such great music on it. I mean, one of my favorite songs of all times is These Dreams. I just love that song.
Heart, right? Is it?
Yeah, Heart. Yeah. So I created a concert of music like that. And what was interesting is that those bands did not use orchestra, but they used all these synthesizers to make it sound like orchestra. They used string sounds and brass sounds. And I just said, well, I'm going to take that concept, but I'm going to have real people play those parts instead of a synthesizer. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I can be true to the music, but elevate the experience.
Yeah.
So to me, it's all about integrity. Whatever it is, if it's a Motown or if it's a Latin show or if it's gospel music, whatever it is, I want it to be done as well as it possibly can be done and have meaning and feel like it has the importance that it deserves for the kind of art that it is. That's my whole mission. So I take things very seriously.
So you spent some time working with Chuck Mangione. Mm-hmm. Mangione, I guess.
Mangione.
And you worked on producing a couple of his albums,
Yep.
right? Did you
five
play on
projects
some?
with him.
Play on
and I
them?
did, yeah.
Played
I played
on
on Children of Sanchez, Live at the Hollywood Bowl, Main Squeeze, and a couple other ones. I don't know.
And then you, from there, I'm sure there's some time in between that I don't quite know what happened, but how do you get then into the mix out in California? You know, here you are, a New York guy.
Yeah.
You're out in California now working with Doc Severinsen and those folks. How do you get from here to there?
It's hilarious. It's hilarious. Connection in the world is everything. Connection. Mm-hmm. I go to Eastman, and I was a pretty good trumpet player, and in the freshman year, you know, you're in the freshman band and everything, and then the next year you think, man, I'm going to get into the higher up band. So I go a week early, my sophomore year, to be a big brother to the new kids coming in.
Okay.
And I'm walking downstairs to where the practice rooms are, and I hear this trumpet playing, and it's nobody that I've ever heard that was at the school. And my heart dropped. I said, I don't know if I'm going to get in the higher up band this year. And it was this guy, Al Vizzuti, who is one of the most phenomenal trumpet players.
You know, you say that, I'm picturing that movie Whiplash. I don't know if you saw that, but I'm picturing that kind of thing.
Yeah. So this guy, he's like one of the most phenomenal players on planet Earth. And he's actually, we're almost brothers. I love the guy. We've done albums together. We've done all kinds of things together. Anyway, when he was in high school, Doc Severinsen came to Missoula, Montana, where he lived, because Alan's father owned a music store and brought Doc in. And he took Alan to Doc's hotel room one morning because Doc said he would listen to him. They opened the door and Doc is sitting there in his shorts, you know, on the bed. And Alan plays and Doc goes nuts, you know, ends up loving him. So fast forward, 10 years later, Alan leaves the Eastman School. He finishes his degree. He goes on to tour the world with Chick Corea.
Wow.
And he calls me one day and says, Doc, because he's still in touch with Doc, said, Doc asked me to write a piece for him, and I don't have time to write the whole thing. Could you and I collaborate on the piece? I said, yeah. So we end up collaborating on this piece together, and then Alan is off in Europe with Chick Corea, and Doc is going to play this somewhere in Texas, and I go down to be there in case anything goes wrong, and I'm hiding in the back of the auditorium, and Doc goes, they start playing this brand new piece, and he stops the whole thing and says, "Is Jeff Tyzik here?" And I'm like, I raise my hand. He says, "Get up here on stage. I want you sitting next to me as I play this piece." And I'm going like, man, this better work. So it worked.
Yeah.
And later that night, Doc and I were over at his hotel.
So what year is this around?
This is 77.
Yeah, I mean, this is
77.
Height of the Tonight Show, or
yes.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, this big time.
So we go to his hotel room afterwards, and we talk for 5 hours. And he tells me all these things that he wants to do, including recording the Tonight Show band. And we ended up doing every one of them. So I met Doc through Alan Vizzuti because Alan met him in a hotel room in Missoula, Montana.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Well, you always hear the thing, you're at the right place at the right time. And there is something to that, of course, but you have to be willing to be at a lot of places to eventually and hopefully get into those connections, because there are many times, where I just know things that in my career that I think, wow, I almost didn't go to that meeting.
Right.
And if I hadn't went to that meeting, I would not have met this person or this or that, and then the connection that could have been made. So, yes, right place at the right time. There is something to that, but you have to also be willing to be at a lot of places so that you can get those moments. You can grab those moments.
Yep.
You never know where things are going to lead. So if you have the strength and wherewithal, you should, look up, take every opportunity. You never know where it's going to go. By the way, Al is a car freak. He always has been.
Oh.
And he's driving now an Audi, like a black coupe, a two-door coupe. I don't know which model it is. It's A5 maybe or something?
Jeff, I can be someone else's brother too,
He's car crazy.
Wow. Guy. It's just, I love those stories. I love to find out how people get to where they are, and it's always it's usually an interesting story.
It is. And I have to say, recently, I've met two young people, both from that experience where I had high school kids come and play with the orchestra. And they both have said to me that I made a difference in their life, which really touched me. You don't think about things like that, but it's, again, you never know what's going to happen. I kind of think of life and those experiences. I mean, kind of my metaphor is, you go to Mendon Ponds, okay?
Yep.
You go out to Mendon Ponds, and it's a clear, beautiful day, kind of in May. It's not too warm, not too cold, with no wind. It's beautiful. Shrubs are up, trees, and the lake is just crystal, and it's just calm. And you take a rock, you throw it out into the lake, and you never can tell where the waves end. They just keep going.
They just keep going,
Yeah.
right.
And that's kind of how I think about experiences in life. You never know where it's going to go. And how many people you're going to touch, or even in a negative. If you do something bad,
it can have some major effects. Yeah,
absolutely.
Right. So I wanted to also talk to you a little bit about the Grammy.
Yeah.
Because, it's really cool. Listen, I love saying, hey, I got Grammy Award winner Jeff Tyzik coming in. I don't just have Jeff Tyzik coming in. I have Grammy Award winning Jeff Tyzik coming in. Okay, so you've been to several Grammy Awards.
The first one, I think the first one was with Chuck. Because Chuck was up for a Grammy one year, and he flew 26 people to Los Angeles to be there.
Oof.
And I was working with him at the time, and we all went out. And actually, he ended up performing on the Grammys that year. He did not win that year. But we were there, and we were at the Grammys, and it was in Los Angeles, and it was pretty exciting. I remember that. Then I think, and then in the early 80s, the Tonight Show Band project was up. Mm-hmm. It was the very first one. And there was a guy who lived in Buffalo, but he owned a store that used to be in Rochester. They were called Record Theater.
Oh.
And these were huge.
I remember Record Theater because that's where I had to stand in line for all my concert tickets when I was a kid. Because, see, Erin, we always sort of we always bust on Erin because she doesn't remember some of those things because she's a little bit younger. But, back in the day when we would go see concerts at the War Memorial, when they announced them, we would head over to Eastview Mall. Eastview Mall was much smaller then and carpeted and everything, and you'd wait, and that whole line down Eastview Mall be just people waiting in line to buy tickets because you could only buy them from the machine there.
Right.
And so I remember
Record Theater were huge stores, and they had vinyl. And this is before CDs and everything. There was, and you'd go into the store, and they probably had 300,000 records in the place. Wow. But Lenny owned a company called Amherst Records in Buffalo, and one of his first big artists was Spyro Gyra.
Oh yeah, yep.
And then he signed me for my albums. And then what he would do is he would take somebody like Jeff Tyzik or Spyro Gyra. He would put their first album out. Then he would try to sign them to a major label. So my first album was on Amherst, and then he sold it, to Capitol. So I was on Capitol for 2 albums, and then Polydor for a couple albums. And I produced a bunch of stuff for him over the years. So I went to him, and he started in the 40s selling 45s out of the trunk of his car as a salesman. And years later, he became he was friends with Clive Davis and all these record company heads. And the license plate on his Rolls Royce was EX-Poor.
That's good.
And the guy had a great sense of humor. So I went to him and I said, Lenny, no one has ever recorded the Tonight Show Band. He said, let's do it. So I talked to Doc, and he had to get permission from Johnny.
Yep.
And so we recorded the first album, and lo and behold, it got nominated for a Grammy. So I went out to Los Angeles, and I was sitting between Lenny and Doc. And, Lenny is sweating next to me, and Doc's wringing his hands, and I'm just sitting there. And this was in they always did these jazz categories pre-broadcast.
Yeah.
And I'll be darned. Tonight Show Band album, Doc Severinsen. Doc goes up, he gets to keep the little statuette. You know, I got a little plaque on my wall at home.
That's cool.
But that was a pretty exciting moment. And it was just so thrilling to see Doc get that kind of due after his long career. And Lenny, I mean, he was just beside himself. It was so exciting.
Well, in your career, you've also worked with, I mean, countless Grammy Award winners.
I have.
Some that you worked very closely with, in fact.
Right. But the third Grammy, I wanted to tell you this. Jill and I went to the third Grammy time I went. I can't remember exactly the year, but I think the Tonight Show Band was up for another nomination, so I went to that. And that was the year Michael Jackson did Man in the Mirror.
Oh, wow.
So I'm sitting there, and there's Michael Jackson, and a lot of my heroes like Herbie Hancock and all these people were there, and I'm like, "Hey, Herbie." He goes, "Hey, man, how you doing?" He didn't know me, but
but you know, if you're there, you're part of the industry. It's
so it's I've worked with some really great people, and most of the time, the really great people are actually great people.
Yeah,
you know. Their reputations
most of the time.
Yeah, there are some people who are difficult.
Yeah,
and that's just the way it is, and you figure out what to do, how to do what you need to do. Because sometimes, I mean, I was in the studio with Tony Bennett, and I had to tell him some things. You know?
That can't be fun.
And well, it just, you know, hopefully there's some kind of mutual respect because you're in this environment, and you find a way to say something that's meaningful and important. But I've been in some situations where it doesn't always go that well.
So does Tony take it okay?
He was fine. He was good. Yeah.
I remember, I'm not going to say the name of the band, but back when I was a kid, I ushered at the Auditorium Theater. So that was one way. They probably still do it. You could volunteer to be an usher, and then you get to kind of see these shows for free. Right. I mean, you'd have to do a little bit of work at the beginning and seat people, but then your job kind of was on autopilot for the rest of the night. So you'd go to the auditorium like an hour before the doors open, and they would bring all the ushers into this room and give you your sheet as to this is going to be your section, and they want you to go into the theater and get acclimated as to where your seats are so that you can help direct people to their seats. Mm-hmm. Well, the band that was playing there was a rock band, and the lead singer had this, thing that he doesn't want anybody looking at him before a show. So the ushers were all instructed, do not make eye contact if the singer's up on stage while you're trying to like, this is one of the bands I really wanted to see. So of course I'm like kept trying to peek up there. but some of these guys have some pretty weird little things that they don't want. They don't want you to see them or whatever. And adversely, there's other guys, like I was just this last summer, my wife and I went to the New York State Fair, and Bad Company was playing on the Chevy Court stage, which is the free concert. They pay these bands, I don't know what they pay them, but they have these free shows on the Chevy Court, and Bad Company was playing with the original Paul Rogers, the singer, who is an amazing singer. Mm-hmm. And this guy comes out, it's like 2 hours before they're going to perform, and Lisa and I are walking around, and I start hearing this guy singing. He's sound checking, but instead of just, check 1, 2, and he starts singing, like a cappella singing, and I'm like, man, that sounds like Paul Rogers. And sure enough, he just came out. There was, a handful of people already sitting down, and he just came out and started singing for him. He was like, I thought I'd give you guys a little bit of a show before I'm going to go on later. And nice. Super cool. And I'm like, he's an iconic voice of rock and roll. Right. So yeah, it's pretty neat. But yeah, there's a lot of different personalities.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as a musician, as a conductor, composer, arranger, producer, trumpeter, are you planning on ever doing another album where you're playing?
No, I stopped playing about 5 years ago because I didn't feel I could practice enough to keep it up to the level that I'd feel comfortable performing in public. And I was just due to writing music and conducting and studying and everything. I didn't have the time to really put into it. And I was kind of, one of the things I was known for in a way is I'd be conducting a concert and then, if it were a jazz concert, and then with no warm, turn around, pick up the horn, and just play. I mean, I would do that in concert. Well, you need to warm up.
Right.
And I started to, I was able to do it because I would warm up a lot before the evening would start. But I said, one night I'm going to pick this thing up, and I'm not going to be proud of what comes out of the other end of it.
Yeah.
And I decided, that's it. I'm not going to do it. So I won't be doing that again. That's over. And I had my day, and I think I did some pretty good work, and I'm proud of it. And it's fun, but I'm in a whole other world now in my head, and the way the kind of music I write and what I work on, and how I use my skills in a different way that is, it's very rewarding.
What about the way things are recorded these days? I love to ask musicians what they feel about the difference of, say, recording something or listening to something back on vinyl versus digital. Everything now, so many people are just, hopping on Spotify or Apple Music or something like that. And obviously there's a whole big debate, industry-wide about the fairness of listening to people's music where you're really hardly paying for it. You're paying a subscription a month, but you're not really paying the artists their dues by... That's why, I think a lot of people that appreciate what musicians go through, they'll still buy the music, just kind of out of the principle of it.
I'm smiling because I some of these music rights services, you get these letters, we're putting your music out there, and they don't even ask permission, but they have a way to license it, and we're going to send you a royalty check. So I had this one company, I'm not going to mention who it is when they're out there, and so after like a year and a half, I get a check in the mail. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. And I open it up, and I got a magic marker, and I wrote on it, "I'm rich." And I took a magnet and stuck it to my refrigerator because it was 3 cents. But
got your royalty check.
I go back. I started seriously recording in the 70s, an old 8-track, which was like 6 feet high, or not 6 feet high. It was about 5 feet, 4 feet high with the modules in it, and I've done everything through digital and hard disk and everything, and all the early digital recordings where there was first of all there was a 24-track digital machine, then Sony made a 32-track digital machine, then they made a 48-track digital machine, and then everybody hated that stuff, and they started getting into more of the computer-based work. So I've been involved in kind of most facets of how the industry has changed, but the latest recordings, I'm in a room with an orchestra. It's live. And whatever medium we're recording to, we're not overdubbing. We're not, we might be doing a second take or editing sections in, but we're not going back and fixing every little thing there is.
Right.
And what blows my mind is if you go back and listen to like Crosby, Stills, and Nash in the 70s and the 60s, for instance, or you go back and listen to the Beatles and the vocal work that they did before there was all this double tracking. And this is before they came out with all the correcting machines and everything.
Right. It's
auto-tune and all that
stuff.
I know. I mean, the power and beauty of those voices and how they sang in tune, before machines could like sort of fix everything.
Yep. Well, even with me playing guitar, I just bought a new piece of software that I just hit a pedal on the floor and I can detune to any tuning I want without turning one knob on my guitar. I can go a half step down, full step. I can go 2 full steps down, and it's like, wow. And it's real time and it sounds great, but it's all digital.
But that's not making what you do better. It's making what you do easier.
Easier, correct. Yep,
so that's
right.
Totally different than somebody who can't sing and sings through a machine to
and
make them sound better.
I cringe when I hear auto tune stuff, and but vinyl's making a big comeback, and it's a nice warm sound, and people are going out and actually spending money on vinyl records again, and I just remember back to just not just being excited for the music, but also even the cover art.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, that's when a cover, it was good to go shoot a cover however you were going to do it, because the graphics were exciting. They were wonderful.
It was going to help grab people so that you could say, hey, this is a story I'm going to tell, and this is kind of the image I want you to picture that story starting.
My beautiful wife, Jill, your cousin Jill, has been after me.
I love Jill, by the way.
Yeah, me too. She's been after me now for 5 years to get the turntable out. And I've been so busy traveling, I haven't. But that's one of my projects now. While I'm home for a bit, I'm going to get the turntable out because I have so many vinyl.
Yeah. Actually get it out and put it up and play it. Definitely.
I loved Miles Davis. I had like 50 or 60 Miles Davis albums, but I remember that I bought 5 rare Miles Davis albums in the early 80s at this store in like Washington, D.C., and they were recordings he did in Europe. And I never opened them yet. There's still like plastic around them. I got to find those. And I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't open them.
That's right. Yeah, because that stuff's getting. Yeah. Some of that stuff's worth some money.
Yeah.
So the vinyl, the CDs, I'm kind of glad we're either going back to vinyl or we're staying with digital online because having all the CDs, I never kept them. They were always scratched up and. Yeah. The other thing that I always think is important, and I think gets lost on a lot of the younger people now because they're listening to music online, and I wonder how you feel about this, but when you listen to certain albums, now it doesn't necessarily just have to be rock albums. In fact, probably when you put your albums together, you had a reason for which track was going to be track 1, track 2, so on and so forth. And whether that was you were telling a story by how the tracks were listed, or if it were, whatever the case may be, they don't listen to this stuff. They listen to songs as one-offs, whereas I grew up listening to, you had to listen to a whole album. Like when a song ended, right away in my head, I was already hearing the next song because I'm used to hearing the album. When my wife goes on a digital thing and puts it in random mode, I flip out. I'm like, no, we're not listening to it on random.
No, it's true because an album was a story. Right. It was a story that the artist wanted to tell through these different pieces. And when I first had my record contracts in 1980, normally you got a 2-album deal. So you would go and record an album, and they would get it out into the marketplace and see what it was going to do, and you were guaranteed a second album, and then you'd see what happened with the second, whether they guarantee a third. But that's changed over time, so many times to where it's down to like when the record companies were still really involved, you'd get one single out, and if the single didn't do well, you're done.
Oh.
So you didn't get the big projects anymore.
Right, yeah.
Which I think is why guys like Prince, just took their own record company, matters into their own hands the way they wanted to do their projects and insisted that they be these stories.
We're not going to have anybody tell us what to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of them went that way. Well, I just want to talk to people real quick. I got a little rapid fire thing I want to do with you before we finish this up. But I do want to talk to people about what's going on this weekend. So
yeah.
On the 24th and 25th, so January 24th and 25th, which happened to be this Friday and Saturday at the Eastman Theater, the RPO is, with Jeff Tyzik conducting, is doing a tribute to Garth Fagan dance.
Right. I love Garth. Wow. In the 70s, it just blows my mind how long ago it was. I was a student at Eastman, and we had a summer festival called the Arrangers Holiday, and all these arrangers from New York City would come in, and guys that normally wrote like car commercials and stuff, but it's like their big chance to have an orchestra, and they would do these really creative concerts. And one summer, Garth Fagan, who then company was then called the Bottom of the Bucket. Yeah, that's what it was called. And we were on stage with an orchestra playing while they danced to this really whacked out Miles Davis piece. And it was the first time I experienced like an orchestra on stage with dancers and Garth's work. And it just blew me away totally. And then I, of course, over the years went to see his work. And when I first got with the RPO, I was in touch with him and I wanted to do something with him. And I kind of scared myself off because I didn't feel at the time that I could do something up to the level of his work. So last year, the orchestra had spoken with Garth's people about doing a project, and someone from the management at RPO said, "Would you like to work with Garth?" And I said, "Yeah,
yeah,
for
of course.
like 50 years." So Garth and I got together with Bill Ferguson, who works with him, and our guy at the RPO, Eric Guess, our artistic vice president, and we had a conversation with him, and we scoped out the entire concert in one meeting. And so we're going to be together. We're going to be performing on stage in between when they dance, but also while they're dancing. And it's a really interesting repertoire. There are going to be some young children dancing as well who are part of the school. And it's going to be
Garth
fantastic.
Fagan was, he's been very famous in the world of choreography and dancing for a long time. But in recent years, he choreographed all the Lion King production. Right. So that's for the younger people out there, that's something to see. There are still tickets available. They are going fast, so I checked today. There's still tickets. You can still get good seats, but not for long. Yeah, they're almost sold out. It's
going to be an amazing experience. I'm looking forward to it. We're going to have 3 rehearsals, and this is an example where normally when they're dancing to recorded music.
Right.
So now we're going to be performing that music live.
Everything live,
and it's spontaneous, and things happen. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's going to be an amazing experience.
So I don't want to leave without telling you my Florida story. So Jeff was performing with the, is it the Naples?
It was the Naples Philharmonic, yeah.
And they have a really beautiful hall there. So it's not that huge, but it's
1,400 seats. But
it's really nice. Yeah. And I called Jeff because we were down there too, vacationing, and I said, we'd like to come see you. And he goes, "Oh, you know what? He goes, I've got some tickets for you. I'll have them at will call or whatever." So Lisa and I went. Now, this was a while ago. This was probably 10 years or so ago.
At least.
And so I'm going to say this with no disrespect and without sounding wrong here, but the median age of the folks going to the Naples Philharmonic, it's an older crowd.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Lisa and I were a younger couple, and we're showing up. We were still on time, but we were just making it. And older crowds typically plan ahead and get there like a half an hour prior to when most people would get there. Mm-hmm. So Jeff was gracious enough to give us these like the premier seats. There's a spot in a hall, right? It's like probably 10 rows up in the middle, right, where you hear everything perfect. And Jeff got us those seats. And I just remember, okay, I'm looking at the ticket and I see, okay, we're in this aisle and there's all these folks and they're all comfortable and sitting and we got to get to the middle. And we just had so many angry eyes at us as we were sitting down. But it was such a wonderful night. It was, if you have not been out to see Jeff perform any of his Pops work, it's really great stuff. Your Christmas show is talked about even in the summertime. People talk about going to your Christmas show. It's an
amazing concert.
Or holiday Pops or whatever,
sure. Well, a lot, because we have, for 25 years, we've had this high school festival chorale made up of around 200 kids from 37 different schools in 7-county area, including the city. And these kids come together for a week where they do 2 rehearsals and 6 performances. And they spend all this time together, and they're all from, different kinds of parts of the community, and they get to know each other, and they get to, experience, love through music and all this incredible emotion, and to be on stage with a guy like Don Potter, who was there in the past 2 years, and to sing with one of the greatest orchestras in the world in one of the greatest theaters in the world. It's a life-changing experience for them. And I think people, that's one of the reasons people love to come to that concert. We've been doing that for 25 years now.
Yeah, and Jeff also did. They had the RPO out on a barge on the Erie Canal in Fairport, and I think it was for Canal Days, or it might have been like the first Canal Days, that was just really great. So if you get a chance to see Jeff or just see the Rochester Philharmonic, whether it's their symphony series, or would that be the symphony series?
Yeah, it's the Philharmonic series is all of the classical concerts, and then there's a pop series.
Yep, and that's the same musicians typically.
Same musicians. And if you have younger kids at Hochstein, we do something called Orchestra. Which are these wonderful concerts for kids from 4 to 8 years old, and they're participatory. They get to be involved, and they're these really neat concerts. And then oftentimes you'll find the orchestra doing community concerts that are for free around in Greece or in the city or in Irondequoit or someplace. You can look on the website. There's a lot of things the orchestra does that are free for the community as well.
And they do a lot of the John Williams stuff too.
It's true. Yeah.
So you hear all the Star Wars and the Supermans and
now they accompany films. I mean, they have done Star Wars, but they just did Harry Potter last week.
Yep.
Super cool.
So it's we have something for just about everybody,
I would say. Yeah, so make sure you visit if you're in Dallas or Oregon or Detroit, just look up when Jeff's going to be playing again. Also, when we talk about musicians and their work and how you can find it online, yeah, sure, you could listen to Jeff's music on different streaming services, but you can also go to Amazon and you can get your work. You can get your albums.
Really?
Oh, yes, you can.
I haven't looked.
Yes, you can. In fact, you should, because there are so many awesome comments about your music on there.
Wow, that's interesting.
And all over the world, there's a whole bunch of them. Really cool stuff. I would, if it were me, I'd be interested to see those things, because it's really nice stuff. We don't usually play out to something other than the Grease and Glamour music, but
by the
tonight,
way, is that you playing guitar and Grease and Glamour music? Oh, okay, I just wanted to.
It would be cool though.
That would be.
But we will play out to this. So I mean, this stuff's so great. You got to check it out online. Anyway, this is the Grease and Glamour podcast. I'm Mark Fierbacher. This is Universal Imports of Rochester. That's our company. We have sales and service of import automobiles. We do everything. We do domestics. We do Asian, European cars. We sell, we service. We have a body shop. Even if you need advice, if you've got a kid in college and you want another uncle or a brother, you can call and I'll be that for you.
Mark.
Or if you get stuck on the Major Deegan Expressway in New York, call Mark.
That's right. Yep. In any of the boroughs of New York. But the Grease and Glamour podcast is just a way for us to get the word out about Universal Imports. And so visit universalimports.com for all your car needs. And please share this podcast with a friend, subscribe, talk about it, leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts. That would always be nice. 5 stars would always be great. If you feel like leaving anything less than 5 stars, ask us about it first, and then we'll change your mind to leaving a 5-star. Anyway, until a couple weeks from now, I guess it'll be February when we do our next one.
Yeah. Yep.
In the meantime, enjoy this music by Jeff Tyzik. And Jeff, thank you so much again for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
It was awesome.
Good. Thank you.
So, all right. Until next time. See you later. So there it was. That was our episode with Jeff Tyzik. And I just wanted to quickly, as a final note on that, I didn't get a chance to talk about it in the podcast, but Jeff talks about, you're throwing a stone into the lake and watching the ripples, and you don't really know where the ripples are going to end or how they're going to affect people or things negatively or positively. But, my father was a big fan of Jeff's and was just so happy that Jeff is a customer of ours and a friend of ours. And for my father's birthday one year, I had called Jeff, or he was in with his car. I don't remember exactly how that went, but we had the whole staff, 20 of us, lined up outside in the parking lot. And as my dad pulled in that morning, Jeff stood there and conducted the whole Universal Imports organization to sing happy birthday to my father. And that probably was one of the best birthday presents my father ever received. He just was, he talked about that all the time. So, that just gives you some insight as to what kind of guy Jeff Tyzik is. And we're just so grateful and so thankful that we were able to have him on the podcast. And I am super thankful to be able to call him Brother Jeff. So anyway, until next time, we'll see you. Thanks.